Heating and air conditioning test 15. I'm going to jump right into this and tell you. Technician A says that eye protection should be worn when working with refrigerants. Technician B says to avoid skin contact with refrigerants in their oil. Which technician is correct about that? Both of them are obviously right. You get refrigerant in your eyes, the lights go out. And and refrigerant and oil is technically considered hazardous waste. You don't need to get that stuff on your skin. You know, I mean, none of us is quite as bulletproof as we thought. Two technicians are discussing how to remove refrigerant from a system. Technician A says you can vent it to the atmosphere as long as it has moisture in it. Technician B says all refrigerant must be captured, and we know that all refrigerant must be captured. We don't vent refrigerant to the atmosphere. Occasionally there will be an accidental vent, like on this 2005 Grand Cherokee that we got out here. That condenser is just a rock magnet. Have you noticed how wide open that bottom part of that bumper is? And that condenser took a rock and he lost his refrigerant. He said it was cooling just fine, and all of a sudden it wasn't. We put nitrogen in it and it was like, you know, right there by that little hole where something hit it. Bad news, man. I think if that was mine, I'd put me some kind of a screen there or something. You know what I mean? Something to slow them rocks down and all that kind of stuff.
I'll be going to Jeep and be like, what the heck?
I don't know what's up with that, or if there's a piece of, if there's a screen or something missing out of there. It just looks like it's just wide open spaces. It's just really vulnerable. But now 2005 to 2013, he's been driving it 8 years, and it's the first time a rock's ever done that. Got it? Okay. Technician A says the same recovery unit can be used for R12 and 134A. Is that true, or is that false?
That's a tricky one now. Are you talking about the machine with two things?
That is a tricky one. My machine will go either way. It's got a switch if we go back and forth. So they're talking about if you got the same tank, the same little unit, you're going to recover them both in the same tank. I don't think so. Technician B says the service hoses from R134A recovery unit must have shutoff valves within 18 inches of the end. That's wrong. 12 inches. They got to be closer than that. And our shutoff valves are right on the end. What they don't want is they don't want the refrigerant that's trapped in those hoses, and a lot of these, like mine's got 96-inch hoses on it. They don't want that refrigerant hissing out into the atmosphere whenever you unhook the system. You're going to lose a little bit, but you don't want to just indiscriminately be squirting it everywhere. Technician A says high pressure and recycled refrigerant is only caused by air contamination. Technician B says the recycled refrigerant should meet the same purity standards as new refrigerant. Who's right about that? Yes, recycled refrigerant should meet the same purity standards, but high pressure can be caused by other things besides air. Now, if somebody happens to just put a bunch of refrigerant in on top of the air that's in the system, it'll make the air conditioner compressor. What's the difference between the air out here that we're breathing and the refrigerant that's in the system? The refrigerant will condense and turn into a liquid, right? It can actually change states back and forth. This air that we're breathing is not going to condense and turn into a liquid. So if you wind up with a bunch of air in your AC system, it's just going to turn it into an air compressor, and it's going to shoot the pressure up really high, really fast. You got me? All right, so you don't want to have, that's why you don't want to have air in there. Air contamination is not the only thing that can cause that, though. Any kind of gas that won't condense into a liquid will cause that. Technician A says compressor failure sends metal and debris through the system, so it should be flushed using R11. What? Technician B says a good method to solve this problem is to replace the compressor and install an inline filter. Who's right about that? Neither one of those guys is really right about that. You know, we got a flushing machine out here. You know, you can when you flush that thing out. Now, me and Willie, when we had accidentally didn't know if the compressor on that Chrysler 300 was that a 300? Yeah, it's 300 had oil in it or not. You know, because it didn't say. And you couldn't. He said it looked like it had some oil in it, but anyway, the first compressor we put on there started knocking and locked up. So when we put the next one on there, we're going to flush it out, you know, to get anything out of there. Of course, I had put a little screen in the suction line to keep trash out of it. But when we shot the flushing agent through the evaporator, there was a whole bunch of oil came out of there. On that second compressor that we put on there, you know, after we'd done the first. But anyway, we rinsed the inside of that evaporator out and got a lot of oil out of it, because when oil coats the inside of the evaporator, it makes it not cool good. So anyway, number 5, if you want to know the answer, is D. Neither one of those guys is right. The system contaminated with moisture should be evacuated for a minimum of 15 minutes. Is that true? That's true. All right. Now, supposedly, that's supposed to, what does liquid moisture water do whenever you take all the air away? Like if you got it in a closed chamber, huh? No, it actually turns into vapor. And that's what they're thinking. It turns into vapor, and you're actually pulling the moisture out as vapor. Got me? I mean, that's what the reason is for that. Because think about it, and when you're at sea level, water boils at 212. When you're in Denver, a mile up, it boils at 160 degrees. So if you're in Denver, Colorado, and you go to boil water, it boils a lot sooner at a lower heat. And so if you keep going down, like out in space, you know, if you just shoot some water out there, it turns into steam as soon as it hits that vacuum, you know, because there's nothing to keep it together. Technician A says checking the pressure-temperature relationship is a reliable way to check for contaminated refrigerant. Technician B says refrigerant with more than 2% of a foreign refrigerant normally should be sent off for reclaiming or disposal. Who is correct? That's B. I will tell you this, that's the refrigerant, the trash gas that we pull out, and I may not be looking in the right place, but if I've got a refrigerant bottle full of trash gas, I'm having trouble finding anybody that will come and get it. They won't take it. You know, it's like you're stuck with it once you pull, like if it's a mix of hydrocarbons or whatever.
Lay it on the other part, and your part.
On the pots on there. Yeah, I've got to look in the glove box of my Taurus and bring me my checkbook so I can pay you for this. Okay? No?
No, that's for the tool thing.
So, never mind. You got that valve cover gasket?
He's paid for it.
Oh, he just did that. Okay, never mind then. All right then. It's complicated when you're working on your dad's car.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let me flip to the next page. How many of you guys are in here about to turn into a skeleton? All right. Yay. Yeah, that's normal for you. Refrigerant can be contaminated with NCG if A, the system is not thoroughly evacuated before charging. What is NCG, by the way? I just described that, guys. Think about it. Somebody figure out what NCG is.
Gases.
Non-condensable gas. Got it? Okay, if the system's not thoroughly evacuated before recharging, if recovery unit hose is not tight, if the technician uses sloppy service procedures, of course nobody in here does that, do they? Or all of these, that's number 8, is the D. Technician A says a system should be evacuated for twice as long if the vacuum pump will only pull down to 20 inches of mercury. Technician B says the system might have a leak in it if it will not pull down to a deep vacuum. Which technician is correct? What happened on our little red Jeep out there? Remember how it wouldn't pull down but about 26 inches, and then when we had turned off the vacuum, it went right back up? That's a blatantly large leak. But like I was telling you the other day, even a teeniest tiny little leak that's only making a 1/8 of an inch bubble every 2 minutes will lose the refrigerant in a couple of days. And some, you know, if one's losing their refrigerant over a period of like 3 months, it's real hard to find those leaks. You know, basically you'll replace all the O-rings and see if what that does. The compressor likes to leak too. The dye will help you though. All right, number 9. Excuse me. Number 9 basically comes out to be a B. Number 10, yeah, B is actually, you know, you've got, that's B. Might have a leak in it if it won't pull to a deep vacuum. So see, you think about it, if it only pulls down to 20 inches of mercury, there's something wrong. You got me? There's something going on there. Technician A says refrigerant charges are given in, levels are given in service manuals, and he's right. Technician B says charge levels are printed on the underhood decal. Who's right about that? That's a sometimes thing. Sometimes you can find the refrigerant printed on the underhood decal. It's supposed to be under there, but how many of you have gone looking for it and found out it wasn't there? You couldn't find it, didn't locate it. I mean, it's not always on there. It's supposed to be, but it's not always on there. Okay. That's going to be number 11 is going to be 8. Yeah. No, excuse me. Wait a minute. I'm on the wrong question. Number 10. Excuse, I was over goofy. Yeah, that's supposed to be a C. 11 is A. Technician A says an overcharge will cause excessively high system pressures, and it will. Technician B says a small can of refrigerant holds 1 pound. How much does a small can of refrigerant hold? 20 12 ounces usually. They'll claim it's a 1 pound can, but I guess they're going by weight or something instead of, or by volume instead of weight or something. Yeah, so that's how that goes. But if you look at one, it's usually 12 ounces, sometimes 14. They don't typically have a 16 ounce can out there. Let's see. There is a movement of to ban the can, where they want to fix it where nobody, except somebody that's got certification can buy refrigerant, but I don't know how long that's going to be.
That's going to be a C.
That is going to be a number 11. It's going to be an A. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's going to be an A. Not that B is wrong. When a small can holds more. The refrigerant is normally charged into the high side with the engine running. Is that true? Really? Yeah. What's the pressures in a high side with the engine running, guys? What's your high side pressures usually going to be with the engine running? It's pretty darn high. Yeah, it can be, depending on the ambient temperatures outside, it could be 170 to 300 pounds. Are you going to hook a can up to that? I don't think so. Blow up in your hand. So basically, our big machine puts it in the high side without the engine running. Now, why does it do that? Why does the big machine put the refrigerant in the high side instead of putting it in the low side? Did you ever think about that? You don't want to put liquid refrigerant where it's going to get pulled into the compressor and lock the compressor up or cause damage. So you're going to put it in the high side so that when the refrigerant, by the time the refrigerant makes it back to the compressor, it's already been evaporated. See, so if you put it in the high side, you ain't got no worries about that. All right. Sorry, Frank, I've got no time for you right now. Okay, let me see. Let's see. Technician A says retrofitting a system is simply a matter of recovering the R12 and recharging it with a drop-in refrigerant. Technician B says the charge level specification is the same with R134A as with R12. That's number 13. And that is actually, neither one of those guys is right. Our charge levels for R130A are going to be slightly different than they are from R12, but most of the time, if you put about the same amount of 134A in there, it'll work okay. So don't, be scared of that. Technician A says that that SNAP approval indicates a good refrigerant that will have no problems in a system. That's SNAP. All right. What you got that? That's basically they're talking about the people that approve refrigerant. That is an acronym, and every time I always have to think about it before I can come up with what SNAP stands for. But basically, that's sort of like the approval of the. No, every time I run across that acronym, it's an acronym. It stands for approve. Something. Let's see. I could think about it in a minute. Somebody can pull that up on your smartphone and tell me what it means. SNAP. What is SNAP approved refrigerant? And it'll tell you if you punch that into your Google search. Technician B says using any refrigerant that contains R22 requires the system to have barrier hoses. Who's correct? B is right about that. Now, if somebody puts R22 refrigerant where our 134 goes, the rubber seals start absorbing the refrigerant, and then whenever you take them out of there, they start popping like popcorn as that refrigerant comes out of them. Don't try to put any R22 in your car. The new SAE standard J2788 requires improved performance from what? That's the recycle machines, recovery and recycle machines. It's supposed to be able to pull 90% of the refrigerant out in 30 minutes or less or something like that, and there's other little things too. But a lot of these newer machines have actually got the little secure digital card slots where you can update the software in them and all that too. If an AC system contains contaminated refrigerant, how can the contaminated refrigerant be removed? Number 16, vent it to the atmosphere. Refrigerant cannot be removed. Use a separate recovery machine that's dedicated to contaminated refrigerant recovery. That's what we do. You remember what we do when we've got contaminated refrigerant? I thought I smelled something. There he is. All right. Huh? No, yeah, that little contaminated, that gray and yellow tank that I've got, and then I've got this little machine you hook up with them gauges, and it pulls the refrigerant right out and it puts it in that tank, so you're not venting it to the atmosphere. You see, that's the right way to do that. Now then, number 17. A container of contaminated refrigerant should be colored what? Gray with a yellow top. That's what color mine is. You've seen that. A container of recovered 134A refrigerant has a pressure of 91 psi at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. This indicates what? What does this indicate? A normal condition. Too much oil in the system will cause what? It can cause excessive pressures, but it can cause other things too, like improper cooling. Ford has got this thing called CASS, which they call, like if the compressor is mounted low and the oil likes to gather in low places, the compressor can get down there, oil can drip and trickle down in there and get in the compressor and cause it to have a tendency to seize up. And so Ford had put this thing called compressor anti-slugging strategy, CASS, on there. That's not in this test, but what it does is when you're spinning the engine over, it energizes the compressor clutch while the engine is spinning to clear that oil out of the compressor. Now, you know that one car that we had, a Willie, that had the compressor mounted really low and we felt like we had too much oil in it, and whenever you would let it set a while and then crank it up, would turn on the air, it would try to stall the engine and the compressor, and then the compressor would clear that oil out of there and it would run normally. Remember that? I mean, that was what was going on there. That oil was settling down in there where the compressor was. But apparently that would turn into a problem with some of the Fords that had a compressor mounted down low, like that Crown Vicky I heard that y'all are working on.
So there's going to be excessive pressure.
Number 19 you talking about?
Yeah.
That's B is what they're wanting for that question. A system's been evacuated and the gauge valves have been closed. A slight increase in pressure after a short time indicates what? It can be a leak, it can be refrigerant in the system, it can be water in the system, any of these. Now, you know what? I talk about outgassing. Let me hit you with this. I pulled all the refrigerant out of my Jeep several times. There was a Jeep like the one you worked on for Ed. Okay, and it holds 1.25 pounds of refrigerant. All right, let me finish this story, and then I'll call on your raised hand. So every now and then I would pull the refrigerant out and put it back just to demonstrate and whatnot, you know, for that Jeep, because it was easy to do. And so I'd pull it out and I'd put it back, and once I got it pulled out, I'd vacuum it down and I'd put 1.25 pounds back in it. And one day I decided, since the compressor clutch was wearing out, I would go ahead and replace the compressor. And so I ordered a compressor. It was on a Friday when I was here, you know, by myself. And I ordered a compressor, and while I was waiting for him to get here with a compressor, I did a recovery to recover the refrigerant with the machine. And it pulled out 1.26 pounds or something like that. So I went and sat down in my office for a little bit, and I went back up there, and I noticed my needle had gone up from, you know, it was down below zero, and it had gone back up. So I recovered some more, and I got another, you know, few ounces out of it. And by the time it stopped going through, you know, kept gaining pressure and all, I had pulled 2 pounds of refrigerant out of a system that's only supposed to hold 1.25 pounds. And what I had done was, when I'd pull the refrigerant out on cool days, whenever it likes to stay in there, it was trapped in that oil in the accumulator. And when you pull it out, it's like I was telling you, some of you guys before, Zach, wake him up. Do not do that, okay? All right, so he's actually it's like shaking up a Dr. Pepper. And the stuff comes out of it, you know, it's effervescent, but it's effervescent with refrigerant. And so that's why you need to crank the engine and get the underhood components blistering hot. You know, I ain't even talking about running the air. Just crank the engine and let it get so hot that you can't touch anything under there, and then recover your refrigerant, and you'll probably get it all. Particularly if you're having to work on it on a cold day, like if it's 40 or 50 degrees in the shop, and you're sitting here trying to work on the refrigerant, and you got to pull the refrigerant out and do something else. You know, like if you got to take the compressor off and get it out of the way so you can change some engine part or something like that. You better heat that son of a gun up, and you better recover it a couple of times, because it's going to outgas, which means that there's going to be some bubbles of refrigerant coming out of that that oil in the accumulator. Anyway, that's why the pressure will come up sometimes after you've got it, and sometimes, you know, even after you've vacuumed it out, you know, you may see it, you know, while you're vacuuming it, you may see the needle changes, it outgasses. Anyway, let me see, where are we at here? Number 21, a technician A says evacuation is done with both manifold valves open. You remember on your machine, you're turning them both this way. If you're doing it with a vacuum pump in your gauges, you're opening them both up, right? Okay. Now, technician B says a reading of 10 inches mercury after 5 minutes of evacuation is normal. That's number 21. That's A only. You know, you ought to see that thing pulling down real close to 30. A vacuum pump removes water from the air conditioning system by doing what? What's it supposed to do? It's boiling it, isn't it? You know what I was talking about a while ago? That's what it is. A refrigerant container has been found to have pressure above the maximum for its temperature. What should you do? Recycle the refrigerant in the container. And you pull it through there. Technician A says vacuum is usually measured in PSI. Technician B says vacuum is usually measured in inches of mercury, which is Hg. Which technician is correct? B. Technician only. What's the purpose of evacuating the AC system? You're going to eliminate any moisture inside the system, but you've also got to get the air out. If there's air in there, you don't want air in there with your refrigerant. So that's bad news. All right, we're going to plow right into heat and AC test 16. Got that? Huh? What? You got 16? What did you miss? Which question did you know? A? Yeah. 25 is A. Normal compressor repairs include replacement of what? In other words, compressor repairs is you're going to do. All of these, shaft seal, reed valves, clutch coil. These are things you can repair, but, you know, I don't know very many places that are going to replace. We used to replace shaft seals at the dealership. When the shaft seal was leaking, we would replace those, you know. But that's something you can legitimately do to a compressor, is replace the reed valves, the clutch coil, or the shaft seal. Most of the time nowadays, we just throw a compressor on it. Got me? Technician A says when the compressor is replaced, the oil level should be checked. Technician B says the oil from the old compressor can be reused. You don't reuse the old oil, but you are supposed to check it. What you're really supposed to do is pour the oil out of the old compressor and add that much to the new one, right? So you can kind of keep the oil level in the system normal.
That's when I was reading wrong. I was going to put the old oil into the new compressor.
Yeah, you can't hardly do that. Well, you can do that, but it's not a good idea. Also, the oil that comes out of your AC system should not be poured in that oil. I mean, the waste oil thing. I got a special container we put refrigerant oil in. What I'm gonna do when I get it full, I don't know, but you know, I got it. I'm pouring it in there. Okay. Let me see where we're at here. We're on number 3. Yeah, how many call on you? You had your head down, right? If you had your hand up.
Oh yeah.
What? Talk to me.
SNAP is significant new alternative policy.
Yeah, significant new alternative policy. That's what the SNAP stands for. Significant new alternative policy. That sounds strange, don't it? Okay. All right. Now then, SNAP. Let's see. That's what people say nowadays is, oh, snap. Technician A says as the drive clutch hub is replaced, the air gap should be checked at 3 different places. Technician B says the air gap is not important as long as clutch ohms are correct. What naivete. That's A only. How many ohms does a clutch usually have? How many amps does it usually pull? You guys remember that from that worksheet? Something like that, about 3 or 4. So I got 12 volts and 3.5 amps. How many ohms I got? About 4. That's right. That's good. Willie just mouthed that because he's afraid he's gonna be wrong. He said 4 though. All right. Let me see here. Technician A says it's important to position snap rings correctly when replacing clutch parts on a compressor. Now that's a duh. Technician B says the whole clutch assembly should be replaced if the pulley bearing fails. Who's correct about that? A is correct about that. I will tell you this though, you cannot replace the, hey, give me that pulley up there, Cameron, that pulley. On the top shelf, there's a top shelf's got a pulley. There you go. Let me see that pulley. Let me see that. All right, you see this piece right here? That piece right there is brand new. It's got a little rust showing on it. But if you ever decide you want to replace this, and there's that bearing where it freewheels on, if you ever decide you want to replace this, but you go ahead, I mean, like if you're getting it off another compressor, you may as well get both pieces off the old compressor, because this is not going to match up. The shape of this changes as it kicks out and in, and these have got to be matched. They've either got to be both flat, or they got to have both worn at the same, time. You get where I'm going?
Okay, so that comes out?
Huh? Yeah, you can pull that off. I mean, it's got snap rings holding it, But I mean, the thing about it is, by the time you buy this and the coil and the hub that goes with it, it costs about as much as a compressor in most cases. So that's why we usually just replace the old compressor. But this one right here, we had bought a long time ago for a particular something. That's a long story. I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, let's see. The clutch must be removed and replaced to do what? Get access to the compressor shaft seal, obviously. That's going to be B. Technician A says the shaft seal parts should be well lubricated as they are installed. Technician B says special tools are often required in removing or replacing seal parts. Who's right about that? C is right about that. That's one of the things that's so irritating about a lot of the stuff that they come out with, is that you have to have special tools for this and special tools for that. You can use your wrenches for a lot of things, you can use your screwdrivers for a lot of things, but a lot of these special tools can be used for one job, and only one job, and they're expensive. Like I bought the little hub that comes off on one of these, like a 2000 Ranger, that little hub that's got to come off of the four-wheel drive before you can pull the rotor off and all that. You have to have a $100 special tool to pop that hub off of there. And once you assemble that little special tool and put your slide hammer on it, click, it just snaps off real easy. But without that, you'll destroy the hub. And but anyway, that was just kind of silly. I mean, I've got that tool now, but we don't use it very much. And it's $100 a pop for that. Use it for one thing. Let's see. Technician A says the oil level in an AC compressor can be checked at any time. Technician B says the system must be empty before checking the oil level. What? Number 7. What do you think? That's B.
B?
Yeah. How are you going to check the oil level when it's got refrigerant in it? Ain't no dipstick in there.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, if your refrigerant's empty, and it's talking about out of refrigerant. If it's out of oil, you're not checking the oil. If it's out of refrigerant. When a compressor is replaced, it's a good practice to also replace what else? Yeah, the orifice tube. As a matter of fact, on Daniel's brother's car, whenever he got that compressor for that Volkswagen, they sent an expansion valve with it. And we had already replaced the expansion valve. That was something, wasn't it? So number 8, you're looking for a C. Receiver, dryer, or accumulator. But what I would be looking at? I would be looking at all of those. I don't like the way that question's written, because the compressor manufacturers like for you to replace the orifice tube, the expansion valve, and the receiver dryer, whatever you got there. Huh? No, you're going to, well, think about this now. Daniel Gonzalez, did you work on an air conditioner system that had an orifice tube and an expansion valve?
Yes.
On that what?
On that van.
The van. The rear unit had an expansion valve. The front unit had an orifice tube, and we put a receiver dryer, an orifice tube, and an expansion valve, all three on there. And that's when we finally figured out that the stupid heater control valve was putting hot water back there. We managed to get some nice frosty cold air in there and all that. Anyway, Technician A says you must install a compressor and charge the system to check for seal leaks. Technician B says if you apply pressure to the compressor discharge port, pressure will show up immediately at the suction port. Which technician is correct? That's D. Neither technician. If you put it at the discharge port, the reed valves keeps it from going through. It stops, it's only going. Think of a reed valve as like a diode. It only lets the stuff go one way. Those reed valves are blown open by pressure and they close, blown open and close like that. Reed valves are moved by the pressure. All right. Technician A says most leaks at line fittings can be stopped by tightening the fitting nut a little tighter. Incidentally, that Jeep needs to go before noon tomorrow. You can make that happen, can't you? It's 2.9 hour labor flag if you were a professional guy that did it every day. So if it's at all possible, you need to get the oxygen tank filled very soon and pop it.
Like a nut that you tighten?
Alright, so we can make a new hose in the shop by installing the correct ends. Technician A says new refrigerant oil should be added to new components as you're putting them on there. That's number 12. That's both of them are right, because you got to use 2 wrenches when tightening most fittings. When replacing an air conditioning component, all the following are true about the refrigerant oil except what? A, the oil removed during refrigerant recovery must be measured. B, the old oil should be drained from the component and measured. C, the oil charge stamped on the compressor should be added to the system. D, the old oil should be replaced with fresh oil. 13. That's C. Alright, Technician A, if the you need to find out if the compressor comes with oil or if it don't. That's important. Me and Willie, we ran into that, didn't we? Technician A says use caution when removing O-rings so they may be reused. Oh, that's funny. Technician B says PAG oil can be used to lubricate O-rings only in systems that use PAG oil as refrigerant lubricant. That's number 14 is going to be D. Which of the following is not true about compressor seal service? A, new seals may require running the compressor to seat properly. B, remove the compressor from the vehicle to replace the seal. C, touching the seal with your fingers may damage it. D, always recover the refrigerant before you replace the seal. What do you think? That's B. But I have seen, at the dealership, we used to replace those seals with a compressor in the car if we could get to it. Number 16, which of the following is the most common cause of compressor failure? A, clutch assembly failure. B, inadequate lubrication. C, seal failure. Or D, none of these is correct. Usually it'll be inadequate lubrication. I knew a guy one time, a guy from in here, he just snatched the R12 out of a system, put some fittings on it, and shot it full of R134 without putting any oil in it, that would mix with 134, and he destroyed that girl's compressor. She didn't have cold air for very long, like half a day or something. Technician A says front seal replacement is sometimes possible with the compressor still mounted in the vehicle. Technician B says front seal replacement often requires special tools. 17, that's C. Now look at that. That almost contradicted the previous question, one of the previous questions, didn't it? See that? Number 15 was always remove the compressor from the vehicle to replace the seal. And this one says sometimes you can put the seal in there without removing the compressor. And always, come on now. Which of the following can cause compressor damage due to lack of lubrication? Number 18. All right. All of the above. If you got low oil charge, mixing different oils, low refrigerant charge. Number 19, Technician A says the clutch must be removed when replacing the compressor pulley or bearing. Technician B says special service tools are usually needed to replace the compressor clutch assembly. Which technician is correct? C. Remember me telling you about that girl Alicia that was in here? She was driving a little Pontiac Grand Am that was like a 94 model. And she called me one morning and she says, I'm not going to make it in today because my car needs a starter. She lived here in Opp. And I said, really? She said, yeah. Me and my dad checked it and said it needed a starter. And I says, well, I tell you what, why don't I send some of the guys over there and we'll drag your car back over here and we'll see about doing a starter over there. Wake Zach up, poke him or something. And anyway, so what you do is, whenever she brought it over here, it would go tonk, tonk, tonk. And then when we went to turn the engine with a breaker bar, the belt was slipping on the AC compressor. Took the belt off and the car fired up. See? So basically she had that little bearing that was, this bearing right here was locked up and it wouldn't let this thing turn freely, see? That was a problem. And so that big old pulley right there has got enough purchase on that belt to where it can keep the starter from turning the engine over. And so I found another old compressor. I had a pile of junk over there and we pulled the compressor clutch off of that one and put it on hers and got her going again. Now she didn't have working AC, but she did have something that would carry that belt, you see. They also make a little thing that you can bolt on there in place of the compressor. It's just got a pulley on it the same size. And that's expensive, for what you're buying, but it works. They sell them at the parts house for a lot of cars. All right, what question are we on before we're on? 20. When replacing a failed compressor, it's also a good idea to do what?
D.
To D. Yeah, all of these. Flush the system, replace the accumulator, and install an inline filter. Every bit of it. The accumulator is kind of like a filter of itself, but that little filter that we put in the suction line, one of the compressor, when we got one that'll fit, works really good. They used to have us at Ford over there to put a filter in there and run it for 30 minutes with the system operating, and then pull that filter out and put another filter in, you know, and to make sure you gathered as much of that trash out there as you could. Number 21, a burned out clutch with burnt paint could be caused by what? Number 21. How about B, low voltage? It can also be caused by if the compressor is too hard to turn. Low voltage to the compressor is going to make a weak magnetic field. It's not going to make a good solid bite with that hub against the pulley, and it's going to cause it to slip. And as it slips, there's friction there, and as there's friction there, you see smoking clutch and paint and all that kind of stuff. That won't always be low voltage, though sometimes it's other things causing it. All right, let me see here. Let's see. Technician A says all O-rings are okay to use with 134A systems. Technician B says the color of the O-ring indicates the material it's made from. Who's correct about that? D, neither one. You can have green O-rings that are made out of all kinds of, you know, stuff. O-rings should be lubricated with what? Mineral oil. That's what you're going to do. 24, failure of hoses or fittings in an AC system can be caused by what? A, broken engine mounts. B, loose or missing compressor mounting bolts. C, either A or B. C's right, isn't it? Alright, number 25. Screw type clamps can be used with R134 systems as long as they are torqued. That's false. 26. Most AC components can be replaced without recovering the refrigerant first. That's false. Whoever wrote those gets the big buzz. Alright. Does everybody know stuff now? Did you learn anything from this?